My name is John Gallagher, better known as Sweet Johnny Cage in the fighting community. I'm from Long Island, New York, and I run East Coast Throwdown with my good friend Long Island Joe. I got started in the scene, actually thanks to my good friend Joe. He taught me third strike. That was my first fighting game. And then I went to a gaming tournament at an arcade, and I actually went there for a Dance Dance Revolution tournament, which is a game that me and him both play. And I also went for third strike. It was going to be my first third strike tournament, and the tournament hadn't started yet, and it was already like 7, 8 o'clock. So he came over to me and said, "You got to run this tournament. We got to get it started." And I had run DDR tournaments before, so I know how it works. But so from there, I took over for third strike, and then I took over that whole tournament after 2 or 3 more tournaments. And then eventually things got so big there that we couldn't fit, so that's when we decided to run ECT. So Summer Jam has a very good vibe to it. It's a great tournament. It's run by great people, Big Eric and Robert Hubbs. And the venue really makes it, because at any given time you can walk through any of the hallways for the guest rooms, and everybody always has the door open or the shades are open, and you can see what they're playing. Everybody's super inviting. You walk past the room, ooh, they're playing Guilty Gear, let's go in there. Oh, they're playing Street Fighter 4, let's go in there. Ooh, they're playing Persona, let's go in there. And nobody's ever like, nah, man, you can't come in here unless there's 45 people in a room. But you know, you have the Salty Suite that gets posted on Twitter. It's room 331 this year. It's run by Deadly Bison, and that's always a lot of fun. You know, you go in there as soon as the tournament ends, and you can just go in there, watch the matches, make some money. But the tournament is run super well. The staff here is great. They help us out at ECT. It's just got a very good community vibe, and it happens at a very good time because EVO is about a month ago. And this is the first tournament after EVO, so it's a good place to come back, be like, yo, you check that match at EVO, talk about it, get a drink. And, you know, some disputes from EVO are settled here, like Fanatics here. Not that he really had any disputes, but you have Unknown and Andre are both here, so they made money match. I'm not too sure. That happened at DCT. And it's just a very good reset for the community because this is like the start of the next season. And it's a very good place to come and just wind down. It has a very relaxed atmosphere, but the competition is still very fierce here. The process of running a tournament like East Coast Throwdown, or starting one at least, we have to get a venue. That's the first and foremost thing. Like when you're buying a house, first 3 things they tell you is location, location, location. So when you're looking at a location, obviously a hotel is the easiest thing to use because you can go to the tournament in your pajamas. You literally stay in the hotel. You don't really have to leave except for food and stuff. But so you want to get a good location, and with a good location, you want to get either you need it near mass transportation because not everybody drives, especially New York players. You know, people come from cities. We don't need cars, or people from Brooklyn don't need cars. Queens, you can get away without a car. Manhattan, you're definitely not going to have a car. So you want it either near an airport with a cheap cab ride or direct access from train, bus, a mega bus or a Chinatown bus. You know, that's very important. You want to be able to get people to the tournament without confusing them too much. For a prime example, we had GamerB at ECT4, and he asked me, how do I get to your tournament? And I had never really considered how would you get to this tournament if you are not from this country, because it was a huge honor for us to have GamerB, and thanks to Abra Media for sending him out, but we had never really had to consider how would a foreigner get to this tournament. So I literally had to call the hotel and say, how do I get to this hotel from Kennedy Airport? And sure enough, it was actually super easy. You take the air train to Jamaica to Penn Station to Morristown, and it costs like $35 to get there. So location is super important. The next thing you want to look at is the size of your ballroom. And that can be really tricky because you may not know how many people you're going to have at your tournament. I mean, the first year for ECT, we only had 167 people total. We had 130 in Street Fighter 4. And then we had this like 3,000 square foot ballroom, but we didn't use half of it because we only had like 160 people. And then the second year we said, all right, you know, we can easily fit this again. But then that year we had 344 and we were packed to the walls. You couldn't move. So then we had to upgrade to like a 6,000 square foot space and, you know, double the space. ECT3, we barely filled it. ECT4, we were pushing it, but we can run ECT5 there again, which we're going to do. So the size, but that goes with your attendance. And the really tricky thing is when you're starting out, I mean, all this comes out of our pockets. It's not like we're really getting paid to do this. We just like doing it. So you want to make sure you can afford it and not like seriously break the bank, because if you, at the end of the day, if you can't like break even, it's really discouraging. It's going to discourage you from doing it again, because then you're like, well, you know, I had all these people, but it cost me so much money, and it wasn't, you know, you may not deem it worthy of doing it again. So you really gotta play it smart, and if you run a tournament in a smaller venue the first time and it's a little crowded, you can always, like run some stuff out in like the vestibule, like you could get away with running something right here, if you couldn't fit it in there. So you really just gotta play it smart. The date is also super important because there's so many tournaments around the country and so many big ones too, there's one every month, and unfortunately you do kind of have to give a certain amount of leeway between tournaments. Like running a tournament 1 week after the other, which always happens in June. I mean, we were the week before CEO this year, and then right before us was UFGT, then there's Montreal tournament, there's Canada Cup, there's seasons meetings, there's NEC, Final Round, Summer Jam, Winter Brawl. There's something every 4 weeks to 3 weeks in this community. So finding that niche weekend where you're not interfering with something even on your coast. Like, we wouldn't go up against seasons meetings while we were planning. Not that we do anything in October, September, but like, that's in Ohio. It may be a 13-hour drive, but the East Coast really represents out in seasons meetings. So you got to be very wary of what's going on. So securing the proper date is very important. And a lot of the gamers, and like I just graduated college, but when you're doing it, you have to consider, okay, is this midterms week? Is the semester just starting? Is this finals week? Did the semester just end? The end of the semester is like a really good time to do it because people are so excited. I don't have to go to school anymore. Let's go to a tournament. So the date is super important. You also have to worry about the weather. I mean, at NEC 8, I think we had a blizzard Friday night. As soon as I parked my car, it started snowing. And then we really couldn't leave the hotel for a couple days, so it worked out. But, you really got to pay attention to when you're doing it. And then after you get the date, you make the announcement, you get your venue, everything's all set. That's when you want to start working on sponsors. You want to contact people, and that really goes with your reputation. Like the first year, you're going to be really hard pressed to find somebody who will really say, okay, let's sponsor your tournament, let's give you all these big prizes, because with a sponsor, while they are trying to help you out, you also have to help them out. And if they don't see that your tournament is able to market their products correctly or to the point that they are going to start making money off of it, and chances are they're not going to want to sponsor your tournament. So that's why you got to kind of let your tournament grow organically. Like ECT1, we didn't have a single sponsor. And ECT2, we never went for sponsors, and they just came to us. And that's the way it really goes. Like, we go after some publishers, try to get some support, get some copies of games for players, to raffle off, but letting your tournament grow organically like that and just doing it on your own for the first few years will really, really teach you a lot. And then, you see sponsors as an added bonus. Like for ECT4, we had $3,000 just on Marvel alone, and we made that winner take all. And that came from a sponsor that came to us, One Frame Link. And yeah, he's a good friend of ours, but we would have never imagined getting a $3,000 pop bonus at ECT1 for any game, and that was like the first year Street Fighter 4 came out when that was perfectly feasible. So letting your tournament grow organically is very important, and letting people come and providing the 100 people who come with a really good time. This way they go home and they tell their friends, hey, East Coast Throwdown was a great time, you got to come next year. Then they bring their friends and they bring their friends. Word of mouth is a really important marketing tool, so the next step you got to worry about is marketing. How do I sell this tournament? How do I get people to this tournament? What's the draw? What's the attraction? And then that really goes towards your reputation. A lot of people try to just come into the community and say, I'm running a major. But nobody knows who they are, nobody's going to trust them. And then they try to run this tournament, they have 400 people and 4 setups. And like, well, I didn't think it was going to have this many people. And then they are screwed for the rest of their tournament career because nobody's going to want to come to their tournament anymore because they had such a bad time. It was run so late, there was so few setups, they had no help. So it's very tricky. You really got to know your bounds, and you can't be afraid to ask for help. Like at ECT1, I figured we could staff it with like 7 or 8 of our friends, and I literally had a heart attack. Like, I felt it in my chest, and I had to sit down, and then I had to leave. And Joe had to run it for like an hour, but not being afraid to ask for help is super important, especially when staffing. Like at ECT4, we had like 35 people wearing a pink staff shirt, and that tournament ran like butter. There's a little delay because of the money match, but like, I didn't really hear any complaints about anything, and everybody had a really good time. So staffing is super important. Half the battle of running a big tournament is putting out the small fires, because you really want to have the rest of your staff running the brackets. You want to make sure everything's running on schedule. You got to go around, make sure everybody's okay. If they need a drink, need something to eat real fast, want to take a break. But there's always going to be little things that you can't prevent from happening. You can try to plan everything, but stuff is always going to happen. You're going to have people tripping over power cords. Oh, we were in the middle of a match. What do we do? This guy paused the match. What do we do? This guy said he registered. What do we do? So you got to be able to micromanage everything, but not be so overbearing to where your staff hates working with you. You always reach what I like to call like the market cap, like a saturation point, really. If you look at the FPS genre, you have a Call of Duty every 11 months, and it's ridiculous. It's the same game with a couple mods. Look at Madden. Madden every year is the same friggin' thing every year, with just a couple graphical improvements. You can do, well, actually, Madden 13 is really hot because now you can call audibles with Kinect, and that is sick. But they shouldn't have made a Madden until they decided to do that. Like, all they could do is release an updated roster every year, some DLC, a $10 update, but with fighting games, I don't necessarily think there's an oversaturation of fighting games because in reality, what do you have? You have Street Fighter, Marvel, Persona, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 is coming out, you have Third Strike Online, and certain people may say that there's an oversaturation of games, but in reality, it's just that games are coming out at a much more rapid rate. So the other games are becoming side tournaments. So when you look at a list of games being run at a tournament, it just gets extensively longer because we've all been doing this for so long that we don't want to push anybody out and say, no, we're not going to run your game. But, the bigger games are released every year. The problem with an oversaturation of tournaments is that they happen at certain points of the year. June is an extraordinarily popular month, and that's because, like I said, it's the end of the semester, there's no school. Start of summer, everybody wants to go on vacation, they want to go somewhere new. Like, when we moved to June with East Coast Throwdown, I was like, wow, the weather is fucking awesome, because in May it's rainy, it can be a little depressing, but then we realized there's so many tournaments in June. I mean, there's the Montreal tournament, and while that may be in Canada, it's only 6 hours away, and those guys always come down to East Coast Throwdown, so we try to never be too near them. There's CEO in Florida. There was a couple others this year, but then there's EVO, and no one is going to run a tournament in July, and it's not necessarily a bad thing because everybody wants to save their money. To fly to EVO from New York, it's like $400 to $500. Then you have your hotel room. I mean, you could play it on the cheap side, stay at the Imperial Palace for $9 a night, but you don't really want to do that. You want to stay at the tournament venue. So there definitely is a saturation of tournaments, but it's also because that, like I said, everybody wants to run a major. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but then they start stepping on other people's toes, running them too close to other tournaments, and they kind of cause their own oversaturation of tournaments. But the thing is that when you're picking a date, you got to be really wise as to when you're doing it. So that's why we actually moved it back into May, because we ran into a problem with sponsors where we were so close to E3 just because E3 is in June. And I really can't believe I'm even saying that out loud, because E3 is like the mecca of trade shows. Well, the announcements may not be too big every year because it's really E3 is really geared towards investors. They want to see what new technology is coming out, and they want to see whether or not it's a wise investment to put money into a company. But it's still something that you need to deal with, because we unfortunately couldn't get sponsored by Atlas or Arc Systems because we were so close to E3. And it's like, well, we're a fighting game tournament, that's a trade show, but it really is something that we have to deal with. So to better enable us to say, hey, we're running this tournament, as soon as somebody says June, they're like, nope, we can't do it, E3's in June. So that's why we moved back to May, because that is a reality for us that we have to now cater towards sponsors. So as far as the oversaturation goes, it's really just that everybody wants to run a major, and they don't realize that they need to start like everybody else did, or like most people did, running the locals. And they think that just because they can get like 50 people at a Street Fighter 4 tournament, oh, let's run a major, let's do this, it's so easy. I'm not trying to sound like a dick, but it's not easy, and there's a lot of stuff that you're going to have to deal with. So that's why it's important to get help from the people who are currently running the major tournaments. And Big Eric and myself, we're always down to help people. But it's the people that just come in and say, oh, I'm just going to do this, you guys suck. Those are the people who, one, we're not going to pay attention to, we're not even going to want to help you because you just dog everybody else's tournaments. But they're the ones causing the oversaturation, and it sucks for the player, because then they have to decide, well, do I go to this tournament? Do I go to that tournament? They're only a week away. Which one do I pick? And some people wind up picking nothing because it gets so close to the wire and they haven't made a decision. So when they go to book a hotel room, the hotel's full, and they're like, well, shit, there goes that. So it's tough and it sucks. And there's really you know, the tournament organizers, we all try to work together. We all have a great, you know, direct line of communication with each other. So when we're planning our tournaments, we make it known, hey, we're looking at this date. Is anybody else looking at the date near it? So we do try to prevent that from happening, but then that's when you get the newer people who don't know that everybody's trying to work together and who really don't know the community. And that's another problem. People just come into the community, and it happens a lot with these big people who say, oh, I got all this money, let's run this huge tournament, and then the prize pots get reduced, people wind up getting shafted, the tournament runs super late, you know, they get horrible reputations from it, you know, games wind up being run in the bathroom. It's like crazy shit like that happens, and it's because they have no reputation, they have no idea what they're doing, and they really think that they have the answer, and just because they have the money, that all these people are just going to magically show up for the money. And then when they realize, hey, this tournament sucks, I'm never coming back, then they're screwed. We have a pretty good venue right now for... It's like I'm invisible. Invisible.